Hey, 7th grade, welcome, welcome. Mr. Hildebrand here, and we are starting our new unit. Okay, so very recently, either today or yesterday, you guys took a pretest for me. Now remember, don't freak out about the pretest. Pretest just tells me what you know and what you don't know. That way I know what to teach you, what you need to know. It's not graded. Okay, it just helps me become a better teacher. So don't stress about that pretest. Remember, pretest not graded. It just helps me figure out what to teach. We are going to be starting a new unit on Rome, okay? A new civilization, ancient civilization that's going to come after the Greeks. Now, we did go over a little bit of a Nearpod today. We went over some notes. If you need the Nearpod code, okay, you can go to join.nearpod.com, or if you have Nearpod app, feel free to go there. That's the code right there, MHQ4N. If you're not sure, you can always pause this video, copy that down. All right, so that's the code to find this one. And we kind of wanted to talk about today, how did Rome get started? Okay, we're going to learn a lot about Rome, the Romans, their history, but how did they get started? That's what we were focused on today, because they're going to be very big and very powerful, but they weren't always that way. So just to give you a little bit of context, here is the city of Rome, the modern day city of Rome. So the city is actually still there. Okay, the city, you can go to Rome and visit it today. But it's not the Roman Empire. It's not the Roman civilization, okay, like we're going to talk about in history class. Instead, it's a city that's part of the country of Italy. So if you go there today, the people in Rome, they're Italian. They speak Italian. Okay, they're part of the country of Italy. But there it is, right there in the middle. To give you kind of a context, though, for where we're headed, Rome is going to be a huge empire. Okay, very powerful, very large, very wealthy, very strong. In fact, all this area that you see right here in the pink, okay, pinkish red, that is the land that Rome is eventually going to conquer. Okay, so they start here, okay, this little city of Rome. They're going to spread around Italy. They're going to spread up into Spain and France and Great Britain. They're going to conquer parts of North Africa and Egypt, Palestine, Israel, Syria, all these areas over here. They're going to take over Turkey, Greece, okay, Macedonia, where Alexander the Great and Philip were from. So they're going to get pretty big. You can still go to that city of Rome today, like I said, and visit some of their ancient sites. This right here is the Colosseum, big stadium. We're going to learn more about that and the sports and contests that they had there. But some of the stuff they built, still there today, okay? You want to have fun with this VR, okay? That guy's looking at the pictures he just took, okay? And you can see some of their other ancient, sites. So feel free to mess around with that. This guy's dressing up like he's from ancient Roman times, probably talking to tourists. But it is a modern day city too, right? With neighborhoods, okay? Beautiful modern buildings to go with their ancient buildings. Just like when we talked about Athens, how they had ancient ruins. They also modern city too. It's just very old. Now we talked about how was Rome founded, or how did it start. Check out this video on the Nearpod. It's going to go through the founding myth, okay, which we'll talk about real briefly here. But according to the legends and the myths, after the fall of Troy, okay, the Trojan War, remember in Homer's book, the city gets burnt to the ground by the Greeks. Well, there's a Latin author by the name of Virgil who writes a book called the Aeneid. And he talks about a Trojan prince named Aeneas who flees, who gets away, who escapes the Greeks. And they travel west and end up settling in the area known as Italy. And so Virgil in his book is saying, hey, this is kind of the sequel to what happened in Homer's book, but it's from the Trojan side of things. So the legendary mythical beginnings say, hey, some of the ancestors of the Trojans snuck away, they got away safely, and they started a new settlement in Italy. Now, stemming from these groups, okay, one of these groups is called the Latins, and according to the myths, the mythology, a Latin princess gave birth to two twin boys, and according to the myth, their father was the Roman god of war, Mars. Okay, so something you're going to see, the Romans had the same gods and goddesses as the Greeks, just different names. Eventually, the boys are going to be kidnapped and thrown on the banks of the Tiber River and left there to die. In the myth, they are rescued and discovered by a she-wolf, a mama wolf, who raises them as her own wolf cubs. Okay. Eventually, a shepherd is going to find the boys, rescue them, okay, raise them as his own. But according to myth, they always stay a little wild because of their, being raised by a wolf and all that. Well, eventually the boys, according to the myth, they reunite with, I believe it's their grandfather. I believe they defeat, I think it was their evil uncle. Okay, we'll double check. We'll watch that myth again to refresh my brain. But to celebrate them reclaiming their kingdom, they went to start a new city all for themselves. Now, they wanted to decide who was going to be the ruler of the city. So they decided to wait for a sign from the gods. So they climb hills around where they're going to build a city. A flock of 6 vultures fly over Remus, according to the myth, okay, according to the legend. And Remus goes, awesome, that's a sign from the gods. The gods chose me. Well, according to the myth and according to the legend, 12 vultures then fly over Romulus. And Romulus says, wow, more birds flew over me. Obviously, the gods picked me. Well, the brothers, they start fighting over this. They're wild, they're violent. They end up fighting to the death, and Romulus kills Remus in the myth. So Romulus becomes the king of the new city and names it after himself and calls it Rome. Now that's the mythological explanation. Okay? We know that myths, they're made up fictional stories. Parts of them may be true, but lots of parts of them are not true, and they're just used to explain how something got started. What historians actually think probably happened is groups started moving into the lands around the Mediterranean Sea around the year 1000 BC. One of these groups is called the Latins. And part of the Latins was a smaller tribe called the Romans. And they settled in this area in Italy. It was great climate for farming. It had big forests where they could harvest timber and wood. And they started building lots of roads to get supplies to the coast to do some trading. So most people in ancient Rome and in this time period were farmers. Keep that in mind. Okay, they are farmers. We're going to talk about the farmers a lot in Rome. Okay. Now, basically what happens, according to historians, is over time, the Latins and the Romans are going to get into a lot of confrontations, a lot of conflicts with their neighbors, and the Romans become very good at fighting, and they eventually take over and start to expand and expand and expand from where they started as a tiny little city right here. I know this map's kind of blurry, it's not loading great, but eventually they're going to take over all of these, what are modern day countries, okay? And they're going to build a huge empire. So that's what historians think actually happens. Now, that's not as fun as the she-wolf and the boys surviving, being thrown in the river, and the vultures flying over the head, and Romulus and Remus fighting to the death. That's the mythological story. That's the more exciting version. You guys are actually going to be writing your own mythological founding myth, or how something got started. Now, for your myth, you're not going to be writing a story about how Rome started. Now, we're going to do something a little closer to home. You're going to create a founding myth for Harrisburg. Now, you might know the actual story about how Harrisburg got started, and John Harris and all that kind of stuff. The Native American tribes who were here in the area when Europeans started exploring. You may know all that, okay? But we're going to create a fun, exciting myth, just like there's a fun, exciting myth of Romulus and Remus in Rome. For yours, okay, if you got a paper copy, okay, it's going to look something like this. I'm going to try to hold it up to the camera so you can kind of see it. Basically explains that mythology is often used to explain the origins of people, phenomenon, or even how cities get started. You just learned about the mythological foundings of Rome. Romulus and Remus, okay, the gods and the goddesses, the wolf, the shepherds, all the fighting, okay. Your job is to create a founding myth for the city of Harrisburg. It can be as wild and crazy as you want, but it must explain how the city was founded or how the city got started. It has to have happened over 300 years ago. So no modern technology, no cell phones, no electricity, no gasoline, no engines, no trains, planes, cars, none of that. Okay? You got to pretend like this is over 300 years ago. I am going to use the PSSA writing rubric, so just pay attention to your 7th grade grammar, okay, punctuation, capitalization, spelling. You can always Google stuff if you need to know how to spell it. Okay. And you can do this on Google Docs, in an email, write it on a piece of paper and send me a picture. However you want to complete it is great. I will be putting this in an assignment on Canvas. It'll be an embedded Google Doc like we've been doing. So check the Canvas page where you're watching this video. Check that out for this week. And there will also be that if you want the written instructions or to just type it right there on Canvas. All right, folks, if you have questions, let me know. I need your founding myths. How Harrisburg got started. It's got to be over 300 years ago. Okay? Have fun. If you get stuck, let me know. I'll help you out.